Hello everyone and welcome to today's SANS webcast, 2016 Security Awareness Year in Review, looking ahead to 2017. My name is Carol Auth of the SANS Institute and I will be moderating today's webcast. Today's featured speakers are Micah Hoffman, Certified SANS Instructor, and Lance Spitzner of SANS Securing the Human. If during the webcast you have any questions for Lance or Micah, please enter them into the questions window located on the GoToWebinar interface. We will be answering them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please note that this webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the slides and recording of this webcast will be available for viewing later today and can be found on the SANS registration page. And with that, I'd like to hand the webcast over to Lance.
All right, Carol, thanks so much. So folks, my name is Lance Spitzner, and we are here today to hear from one of the world's experts on OSINT, or otherwise known as open source intelligence. This is one of the key ways the bad guys are targeting organizations today. Carol, by the way, could you go ahead and forward one slide, please? So I'm going to talk very briefly because what we're going to be doing is handing this over to Micah in just a moment, and I'm going to let Micah introduce himself. This webcast is part of a series of webcasts, monthly webcasts we call Meet the Expert, and it's primarily designed for the security awareness community. We bring experts in to talk on about a specific topic so we can better understand and know our threats and how we can counter them on the human side. So that's why I'm so excited today to have Micah join us and talk about social media and information sharing, because this is how bad guys are doing things like spear phishing, targeted phone call attacks, or CEO fraud. So what I'm going to do now is turn this over to Micah, and at the end we're going to have a little Q&A, give you a chance to beat him up, or if you want, you can beat me up with questions. And like Carol mentioned, this is being recorded, so if you have to drop off at any point, or if you want to share with somebody else at a later time, we've got you covered. And with that said, Micah, let me go ahead and hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, Carol and Lance. I appreciate you letting me come and share some information with your audience today. And welcome everybody to this presentation of Profiling Online Personas. Are we sharing too much? Today what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit about what people are sharing online, how, as Lance mentioned, we can use open source intelligence or OSINT and understand what people are sharing. And then at the end we'll talk about ways that you can give to your users, your family members, and yourselves to reduce the amount of risk that might be exposed by sharing too much information. But first, here's the slide about me. I'm a certified SANS instructor. I mainly teach the SEC 542 class, the web app hacking class, but also am doing open source intelligence. I work in the information security industry as an offensive security team manager. I'm a member of the Nova Hacker community, and I have other credentials there as well. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about why people share their personal information, because that really is the heart of what we're talking about today. Yeah, they share too much information, but let's move backwards to why do actually they share any information? And according to a 2011 New York Times survey of people, there are 5 reasons why people in the United States share information. Now, this study was originally conducted in the United States with 2,500 participants, but then later on in 2012, the New York Times also conducted it internationally. So if you're thinking about your users in other countries, or you have relatives in another place not in the United States, this information is still very applicable. And I encourage you to take a look at the information that was presented. Now, New York Times had wanted to find out this information of why people share data, because they were looking for reclicks. They were looking for people to take their articles and share them out to other people. So what they found was that if they put good content in the articles, people were sharing them. I know that comes as a bit of a surprise, right? But if you have a good solid article, people will share it. So there's information in there that's important to the user. To define themselves, this was interesting too because we're getting more into the psychology of why people connect with certain content and want to let other people know that they are that they believe or they support or something, a concept. So defining themselves, we see this constantly nowadays with political posts and other types of social media posts as well. To nourish relationships, and in countries outside of the United States that the follow-up study was conducted, I believe many in the Indonesian area and other areas outside the United States, the primary reason why those users were sharing information was to maintain relationships. They wanted to share information with their families, with their friends, even though that they weren't near each other, or sometimes if they were just at the same location, they would still be sharing the information back and forth. Unfortunately, the problem comes into play when people are sharing information and they're sharing it too publicly. So as long as you're sharing information with just a small group of people, that may not be so bad. The next is self-fulfillment. And what self-fulfillment means within the scope of this study is people feel good about what they're sharing. Nowadays we have likes and retweets, and we have those wonderful emoticons that everybody can use for giving you feedback on what you've posted. People look for those, and that reinforcement is something that's very addictive to some people. The next is to support causes that the people believe in, and this is pretty self-explanatory. Now, in order to share information, you do need a platform to share on. And as we can see in this XKCD comic, there are a million different platforms that people can share information on, whether it's on your mobile device or an iPad or something like that, whether it's in work settings or just on the internet on your computer. We have a plethora of different ways to share information, and we have certain groups of people that are on one platform and other people that are on another, and it can get quite confusing. So what some people do is they look at this and they think, well, why don't I just make all of my information public? And it might not be a conscious decision, but we are seeing people being willing to share more and more information with people outside of their circles. The next thing that we need in order to share information is most of the time usernames, because when we go to one of these platforms, when we go to Slack or Facebook or LinkedIn, we're usually logging in order to post content as ourselves. And at this fundamental level, at the very, very basic first piece of how do I start sharing information, what we find is that within the username itself, we're already starting to share personal information. For instance, I want you to think about your usernames that you use. Maybe not necessarily within a corporate environment or in your organization, but personally on your social media. What do your usernames have? I went ahead and collected about 3.7 million usernames, just usernames, from dumps of data where a website or system had been compromised. I took off the passwords that were released and I just looked at the usernames for certain patterns to see what people were sharing. And here's some of the interesting trends that I found in it. And we're going to take a look at the next slide here because this has, there we go. So here's some of the main trends that I found, is that one, we have names in our usernames. Now, this might seem pretty expected as it is a username, and within corporate settings or places of work settings, you're going to find this because our email addresses generally have our first name and last name or first initial last name, and that carries over into our personal and social media lives as well. We have some examples here like I am Pradeep, Melanie 1987, and you get the idea. The next thing that we can find in usernames is our hobbies, interests, and things that are important to you. Whether it's going to the beach or a hobby like knitting or your favorite sports team, these pieces of information, when put into your username, automatically sets the sights of whoever's trying to collect it of, this person's a Minnesota Vikings fan or a Manchester United fan. Okay, now for collecting more information about them, that already starts their investigation or their assessment moving in a certain direction. We have a sports fan or something else. Now we see some that have religious terms. There were a lot of usernames that had religious names, religious terms in them, whether it was Allah, Lord, Bible, Quran, Rabbi. There were a lot of them in there. And again, that gives away a little bit about who you are as a person. Meaningful dates is an easy one. Many of the usernames that we want, like maybe Micah Hoffman, might be taken on a website. So what do? We add an important year onto the end. Micah Hoffman 2001, Micah Hoffman 1972, whatever it is. But those dates, such as the one here, like Mom died 7/11, these usernames are actual usernames that people are using. Just that username gives me a lot of information about the person that created it. And then we have the fun one that I think is fun, the perceptions. How do people actually view themselves? Hey, I'm 59, but I'm still young, or still smoking in 2011. It's kind of whimsical, but we see a lot of these things about people and how they perceive themselves. And again, this is what we use to start our open source collection, because even the little things matter when you're trying to pick up information about people. There are lots of people out there that want to do us harm. Lance mentioned some of them already. People that are doing phishing attacks against us, trying to compromise our computers or our phones. People that are doing vishing, voice calls to us and trying to pretext us with, hey, I need you to install this software because your Windows computer is sending out malware. All of these things, people trying to trick us, many times before they actually attack us, they have to gather users. They have to find out about the population of people that they want to attack. And if we move from the just general phishing and vishing, and we move towards the spear phishing, the targeted phishing attacks, whaling attacks, where people are looking at the C-level people in your organization, all of those types of very targeted attacks, people sometimes are creating profiles before they send the attack to make their attacks more effective. So for OSINT, or open source intelligence, people are generally, people that are trying to attack us will generally do so for some of these reasons. We discussed the cyber attacks, identity theft, theft of property. A lot of people are sharing information about where they are, and conversely, where they're not, by using geolocation tags. I'm at the park, I'm having a great time. We saw this type of geolocation come to hurt several people when they were using applications to track their exercise activity. They would say, hey, I'm going for a great ride here, and their ride usually takes about 30 minutes, an hour, and when they get back to their car would be broken into because they would mark where they started their ride from. And if I know that you're going to be out for 30 to 60 minutes, your car is probably not going to be guarded during that time. Extortion. Extortion is a very important one because we now have websites like Ashley Madison, adult friend finders, dating websites, and some political websites too, some political data getting out there like the Panama Papers that are being released to the internet or are being threatened to be released if somebody doesn't pay. And so getting information about a person before this information gets released can be very, very important to an assailant. Assault, kidnapping, again, we have geolocation. Where are you going to be? I know that you walk your dog every day at a certain time because you posted on your LinkedIn or your Twitter, or you're always taking pictures of a certain place while you're walking. I get that. And we have other situations here too. One of the things that I find very, very common amongst people, and this again starts us thinking about the psychology of how we create the user accounts that we create. When I create an account, my hacker name, my hacker name is Web Breacher. And so what I did was I went out to Twitter and I got the name Web Breacher. Now I want to share information. I want people to find information when they go to my GitHub page. So I'll use the same username. And oh, Instagram, yep, sharing pictures as Web Breacher, even email and my web domain are all Web Breacher. And I'm guessing that many of you and your users and your family and friends do the exact same thing. You have the same username or similar usernames across multiple websites. And this is okay if you want people to find that information. But if your goal is to maybe have some information a little bit more private, then using the same username across multiple websites can be pretty damaging. So how do we find different accounts of the same user or same username across multiple sites? We can take the very easy way and use websites like noam.com. Noam.com is a simple web page. Anybody has access to it. The idea for this web page, though, is a little different from how we use it. Noam.com is supposed to be a site where you can enter in a username, like in this case, the Dread Pirate Roberts from The Princess Bride. You enter in the username, and then the website will give you results and say, hey, this website here, like blog catalog, that username is available on that website. And oh, on the Cucumber Town website, it's not available. And that's supposed to help you understand where you can create accounts with that username and where not to. What we do is the opposite. We're looking for the results that come back as not available. In this case, grayed out, the word available grayed out with a line through it, because if we're looking for Web Breacher or we're looking for whatever a target is, attackers will be able to now know, hey, there's actually an account at Sale Blogs and Weebly that is of the Dread Roberts, and that might be another place where my target, whether it's a CEO or somebody that somebody else is stalking or something, that target might have additional information, profile information, and that website. And so the attacker will visit it. We have other websites like namecheck.com, which is a very, very similar thing. Enter in the information that you want to find, a username, and it will check a variety of websites. Some that are similar to the noam.com, but some that are different as well. The output is a little bit different here. Green means that that username was not found at a site, otherwise available. If it's grayed out, that means that the website does have a user with that username. And as open source intelligence analysts, or as an attacker, those are the websites I'm going to collect and then go to and see if I can find information about that user. Next, we have something that's ReconNG. This is more of a hacker tool. As you can see, it looks like a hacker tool because it's got a black background and white text, like we see in many of the TV shows and movies that we see hackers portrayed in. But the idea here with this tool is that it gathers open source intelligence much faster than some of these other websites. ReconNG is a tool written by Tim Tomes, who also was a SANS instructor, and he created the tool so that people that are looking to target organizations, target people for penetration tests or to do open source intelligence assessments and find out what the risk of an organization are, what the exposure is. They can use this tool, and it has multiple modules that can be used to gather information very rapidly. In this case, I've used something called the Profiler module, which is something I created. We add some usernames that we're interested in here to the internal database of ReconNG. ReconNG is a free tool, and then we tell it to go ahead and run. And what it does is it looks across about 160 different websites, and it does this incredibly fast, about 30 seconds or so. And it will look for certain places on the website where user accounts can be found. So in this case, like on eBay, you can see that the URL www.ebay.com/usr/pbjmommy came back with a positive result. So what that does is it can go ahead and collect very rapidly a wide variety of places where your target or the attacker's target might have accounts. The idea here is that we need to get information about where the target has accounts. Then the attacker would look through all these URLs and find information. Now, I mentioned something a little earlier about wanting to be known by a certain username across multiple websites. There are some times when this is absolutely fine. As I mentioned, my website, my GitHub page, my Twitter, I want you to identify as web breacher with me and find all that in those various resources. But what if I also signed up for a dating website using web breacher? What if I also signed up for some other websites like registry or baby shower sites, put in some wish lists there? Or what if I went to some pornographic websites and signed up with the web breacher name? Tying my personas, my profiles for those more sensitive, more embarrassing websites to my other personas, my other profile sites, can in certain cases be very damaging and open up our victims to attack. Think about the case where you would use this tool, something like this, and the Recon NG profiler module does visit some pornographic websites or some dating websites as well. And imagine that you were doing an investigation on a C-level person in an organization. I want to see if the chief information officer of this bank has a profile anywhere. And you found that their profile name was whatever. You put it in here and you find that there are accounts at several of these more sensitive places and pictures of that person and their desires and things. That can be quite embarrassing to the company and to the person. So this is how we start to think about how others might use the data that we share. So we're talking about aggregating multiple websites into a single package and say this person has all of this different data. There are some more ways that you can do this, some free websites that have some good information about people. Pipple, Radaris, Family Tree Now, that's them, and Zaba Search all have a variety of tools that they leverage and access to different data stores where they can allow you to search for information about a certain person or about an email address or about a username or phone number. So we can take something like Web Breacher, put it into Radaris or People and say, go ahead and find me who the real person is behind Web Breacher. And if the information, if it can correlate information, it will give you a huge dossier about the person behind it. It will have name and address and phone number. It'll have other social media profiles, pictures. It's actually quite interesting. One of my favorites of here is the familytreenow.com site, where people looking to create family trees usually will go to ancestry.com or maybe Family Tree Now, and they start their family tree. They say, well, let me look for my father, my brother, my aunt or uncle. And when they put in information there, Family Tree Now says, hey, I found somebody with that name that you wanted. Oh, and here's where they lived. Here's all the people that they are potentially family members with. And it gives so much information back. And some of the information was very accurate. So check out those resources because you'll find information that you might not have known is out there. So let's go ahead and start into the thought process of an attacker. And let's take, for example, the attacker's mindset of, I want to give a targeted email to a chief financial officer of a company or the person in finance for an organization. And there's a variety of ways that they can do that. We've already shown several of them. But also, one of the things that I find, and some of you will agree, will kind of nod your heads at home about, is we have people that can help out the attackers, and they do. These are people called oversharers. And if you've heard one of my other talks, you'll know that oversharing can be quite devastating. what it is, or I'll give you an example of oversharing. You might have that friend on Facebook or whatever social media platform you're on, and they share a picture of their breakfast, and then they share a picture of their lunch, then they show you the empty lunch plate, and they say, wow, I'm full, but I've got room for just this little bit more, and they show you another picture, and they share so much of their daily lives. They use the internet and social media platforms almost as a diary, a public diary. And they share a lot of information. They don't understand many times that there is a huge risk that somebody might collect all this information and tie it together. And that's what I want to talk about now. Is how do we tie all that together manually without using the tools? Well, if users are not protecting their information, their data, and don't set privacy bits, or websites don't have privacy settings to turn on and prevent their data from being public, then we have some problems. It's as simple as Googling. Here I wanted to find somebody that wants to be Fitbit friends. That's what I typed into Google. And we see a couple of results. There's actually hundreds of results that came back. Visiting one of these pages, we see that Calietta Hawk, the top entry here, she says she's a brand new to Fitbit and she would love some friends. Now, what does she do? She gives out her email address. I don't know Calietta Hawk, but I can bet you that somewhere else on the internet, that email address is probably used for a username to some social media website or a banking site or something else. And she just gave it away in some forum to the internet. Do you see how sometimes we can be our own worst enemies here? Now, let's take, for example, PVJ Mommy, who's the second entry here. She gives away a link to her Fitbit account. Okay, there's probably some information there. But we can also leverage just the simple settings of the web pages that she has already populated information about. For instance, the Spark People page, it's a web page that people use to get support for health, for becoming more healthy, losing weight, exercising, and it's a great support website. It's also a website where people can share intimate sections of their lives with anyone in the world. So here we have PBJ Mommy's profile page. And as you can see here, we have a picture of her with her child from May 2014. Okay. Well, if we go to her profile page and look on the side of it, we'll see a whole bunch of its sensitive information, or what I would consider sensitive. And if you look at it, we have what she's looking to do, what her goals are, where she lives, a link to her Facebook page, and also a link to her YouTube page. Now, if we think about this with an attacker's mindset in mind, an attacker who's looking to get information about somebody, and they now have found where a person lives, what a link to their Facebook page is, here's all these YouTube videos of this person, Trisha, talking about her desires and her challenges, and also showing you the inside of her house. As you think about this, think about that. You know, people that are filming inside their house or taking pictures inside their house, what's happening behind the scenes? What's happening in the back of those pictures? Can we see things that would tell us her socioeconomic status? Could we tell what products she uses or doesn't use? And how would an attacker exploit that? Well, let's say that Trisha has in the back of her house, behind her in one of these pictures, she has a certain model of toaster or coffee maker or computer or whatever. What if somebody was to call up Trisha? Because Trisha gives out all of her information. If we look at her public information, we have her name, we have her address, we have her phone number. These are all publicly available. There's a picture of her home on Google Street View. It's trivial to pull this up about people. So I have her phone number, I have her name, I have pictures of the inside of her house. Would it be easy for me to call her up if I was an attacker and say, hey, Miss Omuth, yes, this is Mr. Smith. I'm calling you from the phone company, the Keurig manufacturer, the toast, Procter & Gamble, or whatever company they have for cable TV or something in her area, and start to gain her trust. Start to talk to her about things that are in her house, but she doesn't know I've seen in her house. Oh, do you still have that late model, blah, 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 Samsung television set? We're very concerned about our customers with those sets. We'd like to send a technician out to put a monitoring device on there to make sure to protect you and your family. You send somebody out to their house, or you show up to their house, put a tracking device, a listening device, put something that will watch what they're doing in the house inside of their TV. Now, for somebody like Tricia, this seems, well, why would we want to do this? It seems silly to do this to just a random person. But if you think about the C-level people, or you think about other people that are important in our world that are leaking the same types of data because they're oversharing them or they don't understand the risk, this becomes very relevant. To continue on with Tricia, she has a professional side of her as well. And here too, because she's in sales at Nesbitt Burns, she has a profile page on that website, and that profile page gives away her phone number and now her professional goals, her professional bios. And here we have to think about this. Many people have been told by their organizations, be careful what you put in your resume, because your resume, if you put too sensitive things in it, things that are too sensitive in it, other people could use that against you. Well, yeah, absolutely. That should also extend to any place where your users or your friends or your family are putting in biographical information about themselves. Here we have a profile page which talks about Tricia's whole history, gives her email address and other information to contact her. Now, if we take that information about her professional life and we marry it to her personal life, because Tricia's Facebook page is not restricted. It's not access controlled. Here, all of the things that Tricia is sharing with her friends and her family, including her likes, her dislikes, pictures of her family, it's out there for anybody in the world to collect if they wanted to. And other users have the exact same problems. Now, some of the things that we see here is, hey, she likes certain television shows, or she likes different movies. Now, as far as an attacker goes, we as penetration testers, we as open source intelligence analysts, we collect information about wish lists. You know, when somebody registers and that they're having a baby and they want gifts, so they'll register with a certain company for products that they might like, or a wedding registries as well. As attackers, as open source investigators, we go to those places and say, oh, what do they need? What do they want? I did an assessment one time and found out that my target, his wife, really wanted a certain brand of printer. Like, okay, well, it's a printer. But it was on an Amazon wish list and it said, I want that model printer. So I took my assessment to my customer and I said, sir, you know, it seems like your wife wants this printer. And he said, well, what does that matter? I said, well, imagine if I was to buy that printer and then technically embed something into the printer that would send a copy of every print job that you sent to it off to my server, or put a listening device in there, or a camera, or something else. And then I box it back up, I sent it to your wife and say, hey, this is from your company, or this is from, you know, you've won a lottery and here, have this free product. Well, would you install it in your house? It's exactly what your wife wanted. How did they know that's exactly what I wanted? Wow, I can cross that off my wish list. And this is some of the stuff that attackers will do. So with Tricia, we've gotten all of this information about her. And for some of your users, you could probably do the exact same thing. What people don't realize is that when they share a little bit about themselves on multiple sites, they don't realize that people can actually get that information and aggregate it together. Oops, sorry about that. Aggregate it together to create a dossier. This is a dossier that I created for Tricia. It's a very basic one, and it's using a tool called a mind map, the xmind.net application. It's free, cross-platform, Linux, Mac, Windows, works on all of them. And it's a way of visually taking notes for content. And as you can see here, you might not be able to see that, it might be a little bit too small, but I can take screenshots of each different part of information that I found about my target, paste it into a single document, start to organize it and start to plan my attack. So let's talk about how we can fix this. Now, many of you probably have already addressed this with your users or with your family or your friends or yourselves, but here are some other things that I would suggest that you do. First off, definitely limit what users and your family members post on the internet. Now, this seems like an obvious thing to ask of people, but one of the key things here, one of the key points is what their family members also post on the internet. Because many of you are very information security savvy. Many of you probably don't have Facebook or don't have Twitter or Instagram or whatever the latest Snapchat, the latest social media network is wherever you live. But I'm guessing that your kids or your parents or your spouses or somebody else that you know does have it. And when you go to that barbecue or you go to share something, they might take a picture of you and share it. And so sometimes it's easy to get information about a secure subject by going to their family's pages. So share information with, share that your not only users need to make sure that they're not tweeting and geolocating themselves, but talk to them about educating their families as well, because sometimes those families make our subjects or our targets the weakest link. Well, those families are the weakest links to our targets. The next thing that also seems very, very common sense is enable and monitor privacy settings. The most important thing there is monitor privacy settings. I was giving a very similar talk to this several years ago, and I decided to look up information about myself, use myself as a target. And I went to my LinkedIn page and I pulled it up as an unauthenticated user, so not logged in as Micah Hoffman to it, and I found all of my data was out there in the public eye. And that was not how I wanted it. That was not how I set this privacy settings. And it turned out that LinkedIn had changed the privacy settings and made all my personal information public. And I hadn't done a good job about monitoring my information and checking up to see if it was still private. So make sure that you enable those privacy settings, reduce the audiences that can see the information, and then monitor it and make sure that it stays that way. The next couple of topics are about segmenting our lives. If we think about it, there are parts of your life which maybe are not work-related. What I suggest is make different usernames for those more sensitive areas or the areas that you want to keep separate. So WebReacher is my professional persona, and you can find a whole bunch of information about WebReacher online. But I also have a more personal persona that I'm not going to tell you about, but that is not linked to WebReacher. So if I did want to go on some dating sites, or I did want to go onto some more sensitive sites that I don't want people to easily connect to the WebReacher username, I would use my other persona for that, my other username. And similarly, choose a different avatar as well. An avatar is just that profile picture that you use. Use different ones because it is easy to tie together different accounts, even if they have different names, if they have the same profile picture. The next, and this is more of the corporate environment, provide appropriate places to share information. If we understand that people want to connect, if we understand that people need to or get good feelings when they do share and they get that feedback, those likes and those shares, well, let's not tell them to just stop sharing and don't share information. Let's give them appropriate places to share. And many organizations that I've talked to, they have internal intranets or they have private sections of public systems where only their employees can share information. And that can sometimes be a very powerful outlet that says to your employees, we know you want to talk. Here's an appropriate place. Now, for the rest of the world, please don't talk about this. In your other personas, please don't discuss this information outside there. And then lastly, try to remove the undesirable data from the internet. Now you're going to have varying degrees of success with this. And a colleague of mine, Leslie Carhart, who goes by the hacker name Hacks4Pancakes. She created a great blog, and it's called Make My OSINT Harder by Binging While You Binge on TV, or something like that. And the neat thing that she did was she went to people.com and Family Tree Now and Redaris, and she looked at how do you unsubscribe yourself from that? How do you get your data removed? And she made a blog post and with all of the links and all of the ways that you can remove your information to make it harder for yourselves and your users to be for their information to be found. Lastly, and I know that Lance told me that you all are very security aware people, and I just want to share some very impactful videos that many of you have probably already seen. The first one is the short URLs here, the OSINT Ninja. That's just a bit.ly link that I used to make the URLs easier to read. But these are on YouTube, and I provided the YouTube names at the bottom of the pictures. You can feel free to do that. But the OSINT Ninja links will redirect you to YouTube, just easier. So these are two really impactful videos that we can share with our users, our families, our friends, to get them thinking about the information that they share. The one on the left there, how private is your personal information, was recently done where there's a coffee shop and they put a sign in the window that said, like us, like our webpage, for a free coffee. So what people would do is they'd see the sign and go, oh, okay, and they would like the webpage, then walk inside. Now what you see in this picture is off to the right, just on the bottom of the page, there's a little car there. Yeah, there's some special open source intelligence investigators in that car. And when somebody likes the page, what the people do is they look at the Facebook page and then they look at what's in the person's Facebook profile. And they send that via wireless radio or via phone to the barista behind the counter. And instead of putting on the cup of coffee the person's name, you know, you'll say, hey, what's your name? Say, my name's Micah, and they'll write Micah, decaf, double latte or something. Instead of writing Micah, she would write personal details from the person's Facebook page. So when the person gets their cup of coffee back, it says, tattoo on your right thigh of a butterfly, and these types of things. Like, how did you know that? It brings up some interesting topics. It very, very, very similarly, and a little bit older, is the Amazing Mind Reader reveals his gift on the right-hand side. I believe that was in, that was also over in Europe, and a very similar thing happens where the mind reader does all of these interesting dances and comes up with all this information about the people that enter his tent, and then on the other side of of a curtain are a whole bunch of people doing open source intelligence. And it shows people that when you reveal information about yourself, it's trivial to collect. So with that said, that's the end of my talk. Here's some more information about me. Again, my website, webbreacher.com, has information about running Recon NG module, other open source intelligence, as well as other interesting bits. I am a SANS instructor, as Carol mentioned in the beginning. I teach the 542 class. Here's some upcoming dates, and I'll even be starting to teach the social engineering for pen testers class in July. So if you're interested, please reach out and sign up. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Lance.
All right, Micah. Hey, thanks so much. Folks, I see we've got about quite a few questions, so I'm going to hand this off to Carol for questions in just a moment. Micah, if you could advance just one more slide. And then folks, wanted to share with you also that, as I mentioned, we do the webcast every month. You can always see what's going to be coming next month at /events. For next month, we're going to be talking about ambassador programs, and we're going to have a couple folks who run their own ambassador programs join us. Also, when and where we'll be teaching Management 433 courses, 2-day course on building awareness programs. The next two I'll be teaching are in Orlando and in London, both in April. All right. So, Carol, can we hand it off to you, and you can start beating Micah up with questions.
All right, sounds good, Lance. Thank you both. Many SM shopping and other sites use email addresses for sign-in profile. It's kind of phrased a little odd, but do do they collect the names and accumulate email addresses the same way as usernames?
So whatever a website is using as a username can obviously be collected. When it is something like an email address, I would say that's a little bit more sensitive than just a regular username. What they use that username for, whether it's an email address or just a username for, it varies site to site. But yeah, some of those sites will use them later on for marketing or for selling. And does that address the question? I don't know.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if he responds with more. But
Okay.
will queries done by Recon NG get logged somewhere? I think that's kind of a different person, but similarly phrased question.
Sure, absolutely. So what Recon NG does and other tools, there's a great tool out there called Spiderfoot, and there's OSR Recon framework. There are several other tools that do the same type of things as this profiling module. What it does is from your computer that you've got it installed on, it will make hundreds of web requests from that system. So if you're using Recon NG from inside of a corporate firewall, your proxy, if you're using Blue Coat proxy or some other filtering proxy, your firewall, all of these things will see the traffic going to dating sites and porn sites and other things. And also on the destination websites, there will be queries that will be logged in their web logs saying, hey, somebody just looked for the WebReacher username. And so yes, they can be logged and they can be blocked along the way.
All right, thanks. How do you typically respond to a friend or family member whose comment is, I'm not interesting enough to be hacked, or I don't have anything of value, so why do I care?
Oh, that's an excellent question, and I hear that all the time, and the way that I deal with it is with impact. I'm classically trained as a penetration tester, a security tester, where during my normal work I break into websites, and when I do that, my goal is to find the information that makes my customer uncomfortable. Oh my God, you found all of our salary information? Wow, that's really bad. Likewise, when I'm asked this question about people's online personas, and they say, well, I don't have anything interesting to share, I start to think about all of the different areas where they might feel sensitive. Hey, are you on that dating site? Do you provide any of your likes or dislikes, your turn-ons, turns-offs? How about if your boss or somebody that's looking you up in your professional setting was to see that information? I also like to provide these videos, and that's why I put them in. The videos that show this really exploited in a healthy way. The coffee shop one and the fake mind reader. I give those to people to say, listen, these people didn't have anything to, that anybody wanted, but can you imagine if somebody was to take this to a bad end? One of these videos that I didn't share, which I can if you want, was one where a bank, I believe it was at HSBC over in Europe, they actually went through and stole somebody's identity. They went through and created makeup and made that person look like this person, and because they could see all of his Facebook profile, they knew who his friends were, where he hung out, and they did things as far as making some fake reservations for him at a hotel, ordering a harp for him. So there's, on YouTube, there are a bunch of these videos that can be very helpful in explaining why just ordinary information that you share might be interesting to attackers.
All right, thanks, Micah. So both of those people with questions have clarified something. The first one that we talked about, he says that you had sort of addressed it. Noam.com, namecheck.com are used to find the same username across multiple sites. If sites use an email address for username, do these sites provide the same information using email addresses as it would a traditional profile name?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if in NameCheck or Noam you typed in an email address, would it search the different websites for those email addresses? I believe it would. And some of the websites, the responses that come back, it will give you an error, or it'll say that the username is too long. For instance, Twitter usernames can only be a certain length. So if I use Dread Pirate Roberts, that's too long for Twitter, so it will give me an error. So you'll see some of those things coming back. For email addresses, though, since we do a lot more things with email addresses than just regular old usernames, I like to start out in PIPL, Radaris, That's Them, those sites, because you've got something really solid there that can be used across multiple sites.
All right, thanks. And then the second person said, will ReconNG log it in a server hosted by ReconNG?
Oh, no. The ReconNG software is something that you download for free from reconnng.com or recon-ng.com. It'll redirect you to a Bitbucket website. You pull the data, it's Python scripting language. You pull it onto a local computer that you have, and then you run it locally from your computer. There is a tie that Tim Tomes has put in there, but to Google Analytics, just so he can see how many people are using which modules, but there's a setting there to turn that off as well. And I think on my web page I have a setting to do that. But no, the ReconNG, Spiderfoot, and these other reconnaissance tools that you would run locally on your computer don't generally log in on another server. There are tools out there like Maltego, where free transformations of data do get passed through a centralized server and don't go from your system directly.
All right, thanks. Now we're moving on to another topic. Apart from some of the tools outlined in this presentation, any recommendations for tools or strategies to monitor your online persona, removal of undesirable data, perhaps?
So there are companies out there that you can pay to monitor your online persona. There are checks that you can do, but they are more manual. There are some identity protection companies out there that will, I don't know any of them off the top of my head, but they will monitor your online personas. You type in your usernames on different websites, and they will look for those in password dumps and things. But as far as monitoring them for sensitive information or too much information, that's something that you're going to have to look at and track yourself, because what you consider too much information might be different from what I consider too much information. I like to think of those as personal risk-based decisions that each of us make every day in our lives about deciding, well, do I tweet this now with the geolocation on, or do I Facebook this and tag a user? So honestly, I don't have any things. Maybe Lance knows of any services like that for monitoring social media.
Yeah, like you, I know there's a couple out there, but I don't happen to know them by name offhand.
Okay, thanks. Are these social media sites not encrypting their data at rest, or are these brute force attacks?
These are more brute force username guessing attacks. For ReconNG, Noam, Namecheck, what they do is they will reach out to a website, look for a certain URL, and make a request. In the profiler module, again, you can go to webreacher.com and look up profiler. There's a file that says, if you put a username in this URL in this spot, then it is on that website. Otherwise, it's not. There are other websites like People and Radaris and That's Them that collect information. So they either buy it or they aggregate it in some other way, and they get the information, they hold it in their databases. So we have a push and a pull. The push is going from from noam.com or namecheck.com, going out to a website saying, hey, is Micah there? Is Webreacher there? Oh, no? Okay, I'm going to mark as no. The other websites like Radaris and That's Them, they already have collected that information, and they usually check their records. That's why you can go to Radaris and say, don't show my information to anybody, and it will flag that all of your records inside of it will not be releasable.
All right, thanks. I had a person in CEH class lately who did not have a Facebook page, and she found out someone was impersonating her. I would let people know who don't use social media to make an account and then not use it. And what are your thoughts on that, Micah?
Well, that's a very valid point that nowadays anybody can create any account that they want. If I wanted to right now, I could create a Donald Trump, maybe not a Donald Trump account, but I could create an account for a high-profile person. Because you know what? There are other people in this world named Mark Zuckerberg or Barack Obama. There are other people with those names. So social media systems like Facebook and LinkedIn, they need to have provisions that allow for multiple people with the same names to be created. Now, it's one thing if I register as Donald Trump from Maryland on a website. It's another one totally if I use Donald Trump's picture and put fake information about him in there and try to steal his identity or impersonate him on the site and try to friend his friends. That's totally different. And many of the social media websites actually have mechanisms to report fake users, impersonating users, and the like. So there's probably very little that you can do in most websites to prevent somebody from picking your username, aside from you picking the username and not doing anything with it. But then again, somebody could pick WebBreacher 1 or WebBreacher 2 and still take that. There's nothing to prevent them from doing that.
All right, thanks. A couple of the attendees are interested in getting a link to the posting about the woman that talked about removing online information and accounts. Or are
Sure.
you allowed to name that blog? If you want to
Oh,
send that to
absolutely.
me in chat, I could send it to the group, or if you want to do it verbally, that's fine.
I just put it in the chat.
Okay, I'll send that out to the entire audience and while you're answering the next question. Are historical records of accounts, for example, John Doe had a forum account with username XYZ on March 10th, 2014, typically returned with any of these profiling queries?
Yes and no. I would say to varying degrees. Websites like pipl.com, they will say, I found a social media profile for this person. There's a Twitter account. Here's a link to it. They don't go through and necessarily get information about when the profile was created or that kind of information. The reason is that it gets very, very challenging to gather that information and organize it and stay up to date with it. Early on in my Recon NG profile module writing, I wrote a module called Dev Diver, D-E-V, Diver, D-I-V-E-R. And what it did was it went to GitHub and code.google.com and other websites where people would post their code. And it would say, hey, is WebBreacher here? Oh, it is. Give me the last time they logged in. Give me all this information. It would scrape data from the pages. That module is still in Recon NG. But the problem is that when that web page changes one thing on the page, maybe changes the name of an object or something, then that whole script will break or information won't be retrieved. So it's very high maintenance to maintain. So in general, in order to gather that information, it is mostly a more cumbersome process for people to do. Or you can pay for somebody else to do it. There are Intellis.com and some other services. You can pay them a certain amount of information and they will do that work for you.
All right, thanks. I think we have time for one last question. Can social engineering information be gathered from text messaging from a cell phone?
I'm going to say in general, no. And I'll caveat that. Text messaging, true text messaging using the SMS protocol from a cell phone with no Wi-Fi access, in order to intercept those communications, somebody's either going to have to pretend to be a cell tower if you're operating over the cellular bands, and do that impersonation, or get that information by conducting a man in the middle or attacking some other place along the path from your cell phone to another person's cell phone. And the caveat there is that this is for true SMS messages. A lot of the apps that we use now that do messaging, like WhatsApp and Signal and even some other SMS messaging applications may not actually be sending the data over the SMS protocol. They might be using your data to do that, in which case those may be more likely to be sent over Wi-Fi and not cellular. If that's the case, then they could be intercepted. But SMS, as far as I'm concerned, it takes a little bit more effort in order for somebody to intercept those messages.
All right, well, with that, we are out of time. Thank you so much, Micah and Lance, for your great presentation, which helps bring this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, including this one, you can visit sans.org/webcasts. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS webcast.